Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 359, Nova Luna.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Go to their website, check out the toppers that they have, and find a table in your house that could be amplified, exonerated, and beautified.
Exonerated?
I don't know.
What crime did it commit?
Crime did it commit?
Is this like...
It committed the crime of not being a game table.
Yes.
So it's witness protection, you know, like just give it a whole facelift. People
You're
will
totally
not recognize it.
I'm gotta leave this in now too. You're totally putting your old crappy table into witness protection and covering it with a Game Toppers from GameToppersLLC.com. So it's great. My neighbor was offering a free table, and I thought, you know what? That would be the perfect thing to put a Game Topper on. It had been sitting in their carport, it had been hit by the weather, but still, that table would be the perfect place to put a Game Topper.
What table isn't the perfect place to put a game topper?
One that only has 3 legs.
There you go. Is that really a table anymore?
It's a tripod table. No, it's a tripod. Go to their website, check out the variety of products that they have, and find something for your house. You will not be disappointed. GameToppersLLC.com.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard. I'm Andy Holliday.
And I'm Nathan Howard.
So this week we're discussing Nova Luna. That's a new, I guess I should say, another new Uwe Rosenberg game that we played because, spoiler alert, Nathan loves him. So the new moon is a symbol for new beginning, the perfect time to start something new and to plan your future. And that's what it is, Nova Luna, Latin for new moon. In each round of this abstract tile-laying game, you have to plan your future anew, developing a new strategy to cope with what the moon wheel has to offer you. On each turn, you have to decide on which tile from the moon wheel to place in front of you. Each new tile brings a new task you have to fulfill. In order to do so, you need to place the tiles of the correct color adjacent to the task you want to complete. But these, of course, come again to bring you new tasks. And each time a task is solved, you may place one of your markers on it. So decide wisely and be the first one to place all of your markers. It's a 1 to 4 player game. Takes roughly 30 minutes to 60 minutes. And it's published by... I can't even say that.
Spielvisa.
Sure. What Dave said.
Guess I gotta leave that in now. So, the biggest problem we're gonna have with this is trying to explain how it works without visuals.
Yes.
Especially since the description abstract.
Yeah.
It's definitely a game that you have to see. It's also definitely a game that you have to play. I really, really enjoyed this game. It mentioned the moon wheel. There's a little crescent moon that sits on one spot on the moon wheel, and then you have these little square tiles that fill in 11 other spots around this moon wheel. Each player also has a little token that goes on the moon wheel that when they take their turn, they'll move it up to 3 spaces.
Orbiting the moon wheel, since we're talking space, we're going to use orbiting.
I like it.
Are tiles. And each of those tiles has a number on them, and then they have a number of tasks. And that number of tasks can be anywhere from 0 to the maximum of 3. And what these tasks are, you will put a tile into your tableau, so the area in front of you. These tasks will have a variety of 4 different colors. There's a teal, a blue, a red, and a yellow. Depending on the tile you've picked up, each task requires that new tiles be adjacent to that specific tile that match the color pattern that is in the task. And you have to have touching contiguously to the original tile the required colors that are in each of the goals or the tasks.
I was really hoping you would use the word contiguously, because I like that word a lot.
This game is really interesting is because it's not just in a regular turn order either. So it's not just going clockwise around the table. It's whoever starts, they have a little marker that they move, off of the tile that they pick up that has those tasks that you were talking about.
Pick up a 2, you move your piece 2 spaces.
And on my turn, since I was the next one, I pick up this one that says 7. So the higher number ones that you can pick up, typically they're easier tasks to complete. And so then I move forward 7 spots. And so then Andy moves forward 3 spots, and let's say you move forward 2 spots. Well, because you just landed on top of Dave's piece, you would go again, then Dave would go again, then Andy would go, and then depending on where they hopscotch, eventually it'll get back to my turn.
Right. So I guess maybe we should step back a little bit and explain that on the inner loop of the moon wheel is the spaces that you're talking about. So there are 26 spaces that represent the phases of the moon. A new moon to a waxing moon to a full moon to a waning moon, back to a new moon. As you pick up one of those tiles that you're going to add in your tableau, you will move your marker along that moon track. Like you were saying, Logan, whoever is the furthest back on that moon track, it's their turn. And so the order, it doesn't go clockwise, exactly like you were saying. It's whoever is in last place. If there's more than one person on that space, then it's whomever is on the top of that pile.
And the cool thing is, say, for example, everybody else is 5 spots ahead of me, and it's my turn to go now. I could take a tile that has a 2, move forward 2. I'm still 3 spots behind everybody else, so it's my turn again. I could take another 2, and I would still be behind them, so I could take a third turn, take another turn to end up. You can get multiple turns in a row, which can be really cool, except like Logan, like you pointed out, the lower numbers are typically the harder tasks to finish. Sure, yeah. You know, I was just giving an example of taking multiple turns and taking a couple of tiles that have a 2. So I'm going to pull this tile right here that I am looking at. It's a 2, and it has one task. And the task is just represented by a circle that is filled with bubbles of the 4 colors that you were talking about, Nate. This task in particular here, it has 4 bubbles, and they are 4 teal bubbles. So that means in order to complete this task, I have to have 4 teal tiles that are connected to this tile. So it has to be either touching 4 or having 4 contiguous of that color next to it. Some of them, though, have different colors. For example, there's a tile here that has 4 bubbles, one of each of the 4 colors. So you could have a blue that is next to a red, that is next to a teal, that is next to a yellow.
Or you could have the yellow on the other side of that tile.
I love this style of game. I just used 2 examples of tasks that have 4 bubbles. There are tasks that have only 1. They're not always 4.
So one thing I noticed when we were playing this game is as people are going before you, you're trying to plan out your turn, and a lot of the tiles you're planning on taking get taken because you want specific colors, like Dave was saying, to complete these tasks. The board doesn't just automatically refresh. Your choices get more and more limited as more tiles get taken that are around the moon wheel. Once it gets down to 1 or 2, then you can refill it. So that made it a little more difficult because you don't know what's going to get refilled with. Typically, it seemed like when we played anyway, a lot of the tiles that were left toward the end were high number tiles. So you get stuck with a high number tile, and then you don't get, if you end up pulling a 7, then sometimes you don't get a turn for several other people's turns.
Which was super frustrating. I was actually really surprised about how close the game was at the end. Because the goal of the game is that you each have a number of discs, depending on how many players you have. So like when we played, I think the goal was 18?
20.
It was all of them for 20.
Yeah.
So you have 20 little tiles, and so each one covers a task. So as soon as you complete the task, you put it out there. And it felt like I was doing horrible the entire time just because abstract, connecting things, just not being able to get the ones that I want. Because sometimes, even though they were higher numbered tiles, when you went to go fill up, you can only move so many spaces still. Sometimes it was just out of my reach to get to the one that I actually wanted. But I was actually really surprised about how close of a game it was at the very end.
Or Nathan keeps hogging all the blue tiles.
That's just the thing, is Nathan always has to hog something.
Is that a fat joke? You do run into that, Andy. You bring up the point that you can replenish the tiles that are around the moon wheel when there's 1 or 2. And usually, not always, but it seemed like all the games that I've played, that there's 2 tiles and they're nowhere near each other. If there's 6 empty spots between the 2 tiles and where the current marker is, if you choose at that point to refresh the wheel and add new tiles, that drastically changes what options you have. The next 3 locations, which had nothing, have 3 unknowns. You have to balance that decision. Is it worth drawing an unknown, or the problem that I do see, or drawing something that could completely backfire on me? And like you mentioned, that usually when we were playing, that there was high numbers that were there, which would make you last longer. Sometimes we'd refresh it, and it was all 7s that came out anyways.
Yeah, there was a couple times people got hosed with that, where they went to, I'll refill it because there's only the high number left, and then all their options were super high numbers.
Yeah, so you'd have a plan where you'd be in the back, and you're like, okay, if I refresh this, I'm going to get a bunch of low numbers.
Be able to get a couple of tiles, finish some tasks, and it just doesn't work.
And then it backfired. You do have that option. I mean, sometimes it pans out, and sometimes it backfires on you. The randomness of that, I was really pleased with. I liked that knowledge isn't there. There isn't no knowledge. But you have that element of, is this going to work for me, or is it going to not?
Well, one thing that was pleasing to me when we were playing this is, say I'm working on a specific task, and I've been working on that. Maybe it's a more difficult task to complete. But the benefit to the way it works, maybe, for example, Nathan, you took a lot of the blues in the game we played, and I needed a lot of blues for a specific task that I was working on. However, like you said, almost every tile you place gives you a new task. So there was so much to work on in your tableau. I mean, it was endless things. You just had to decide, what am I going to work on? And you almost always have an option on the board of what you want to do and a place for it to go that will work on one of the tasks that you have available.
And I guess maybe something that we missed that was probably pretty key is that when you complete a task, you'll put one of your 20 markers onto a tile that's in your tableau that shows that that specific task has been completed. I mentioned I was trying to monopolize all the blues. That's because a lot of my tasks required those blues. So I was trying to build that out. I don't even remember if I won that. I'd have to look that up. You won, Dave? Exactly like you mentioned, Andy. If you get too focused, like I got too focused on trying to complete those blues, that I passed up opportunities to complete other tasks. When Dave was getting to the point where he had 2 or 3 tokens to put out, you could say, okay, well, I can try to block this, I can try to block that. But anything we tried to block still left another avenue open, which I think makes the game shine. There's someone like me who gets that tunnel vision and stuck on saying, okay, I need blue, I need new blue, I need blue, and miss those opportunities to place out some of those other tiles that can complete those other tasks.
I think when we played, I only had one of my tokens left to cover up a task. It was pretty close. Like I said before, at the beginning, it felt like I was doing so poorly because I was building it out, building those tableaus, not really completing everything. But then it got to the point where it was like, oh, if I just put this one here, I complete 4 separate tasks. And that happened a bunch. And so it's really interesting how that pans out.
A couple of things. This game, I think, has a lot of simple and unique mechanics to it as far as the turn order and different things like that go, but just the tasks and completing the tasks themselves. So again, looking at just got a couple of the tiles here that we're looking at to help us try and describe it. But there's a tile here that has 2 tasks. One of them is to have 2 blues. The other one is to have 4 blues connected to it. This tile itself happens to be teal. The nice thing about this one is I've got this task to have 4 blues connected. Well, if I complete that task, I will have also completed the task to have 2 blues connected. It's a great tile to have. Now, I've got another one right here, though, that is a blue tile, so it will help me to complete this task. One of the tasks that it has is to have 1 teal tile connected to it. By putting this blue tile working on my tasks for the original tile I was talking about, well, I just completed one of this tile's tasks by placing it next to the teal tile. They overlap, and they can, kind of what you were pointing out, Logan, is you can place one tile and have it complete several different tasks on itself, even when you place it.
You just have to remember the tile the task is on doesn't count towards the task.
Yes, it doesn't count. You can't count itself in completing a task.
Correct.
Often it won't have its own color on there, but occasionally it does have its own color on there. You have to remember that. You are absolutely correct, Andy. You cannot count the tile itself.
I know that threw me off a couple of times when I was counting some of the spaces when we played was, okay, I need 4 blues. Then I had to recount and be like, oh, I already have 4. I need a 5th one, including the task giver.
We talked last week about Uwe Rosenberg game that I bought because I knew it was a game that my wife was going to like. This game was a game I bought because I knew it was a game my wife was going to like. So apparently my wife likes Uwe Rosenberg games. I got to pick up some more of them. I could pick up Patchwork. That'd be a great one to add to my collection as well. Cottage Garden would be great. But she really loved this game. Andy, for you, something Sabrina would really enjoy as well. Seems like the more we talk, the more our wives are very similar in thought, and personality, because there's a lot of similarities in games that they enjoy and apparently TV shows that they enjoy. Both fans of older shows, which is great.
And old men.
And old men. Yeah.
True.
Well, not Andy. Andy's not nearly as old as I am.
Technically, she's older than me.
Technically, my wife is older than me.
Technically, that doesn't exclude them from liking old men either.
The pattern building in it, like I mentioned last week with New York Zoo, the pattern building in this is just something that my wife sees. I got Ashley, my oldest daughter, to play this, which was a treat for me because she doesn't play very many games because she's more busy now. She's getting married, and so she's moving on. So our time together is not as frequent as it used to be. So I tend to cherish those moments when we get games together. She really enjoyed this game. Quick to learn, easy to play, but yet challenging to master. We mentioned similar things with New York Zoo, and this is going to follow right along the lines. We did mention at the beginning of the show, this does have a solo play, a solo variant. With that, not competing against any sort of AI, competing against yourself. Say, okay, I did it in this many rounds, and I'm going to try to do it with a lower time spent to try to optimize master using the least amount of tiles, least amount of time to complete that game. Which I really like, because often when you're playing a solo variant of a game, it's a completely different experience than playing with people. Like, again, that really sticks out to me is Terraforming Mars. When you play Terraforming Mars solo, the way you play the game is completely different than when you're playing competitively. When you're playing solo, you're trying to master your tableau in an effort to move up the oxygen, the heat, and the oceans as quick as you can, because you only have a set amount of generations that you have to complete that terraforming of Mars. Where this is, you're trying to master against yourself. You're trying to optimize your turns so that you're maximizing those tile placements. The skills that you learn and the focus that you learn in playing it solo is going to transition right into playing it competitively. You try to maximize your turns. It's not necessarily about trying to stop your opponent. It's more about maximizing your turn so that you can complete the most tasks in the least amount of time. This is one of those few games where that solo variant, in my opinion, helps you improve your play when you play competitively.
I think luck-based play solo, though, isn't it?
I mean, it can be.
Because it's just what comes out, right?
It is what comes out, but it is also of how you place what comes out. I mean, you can compare that exactly with competitive version when you're playing with multiple people. It's what's available, and more importantly, what's available on my turn. If you're playing solo, it does give you a little bit of advantage. You know nobody else is going to be taking your tiles. Whereas you're playing competitively, those tiles aren't necessarily always going to be there.
Right.
On the flip side, sometimes you don't like the tiles that are out, so if you're playing competitively, those tiles get taken and you have possibly better options when the board gets refilled a little more quickly.
Yeah, it can be very advantageous that way.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, I thought comparing this to New York Zoo, I think this game is definitely a little harder to wrap your head around. Just the abstractness of the game itself. I think once we all figured it out, it was straightforward, but it's different, which I liked. I thought it was completely different from New York Zoo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
And I didn't even realize it was the same game designer when we played it. It felt completely different. Great game.
Nathan, you were talking about Cheryl loving both of these games because of the pattern building involved. And I'm kind of what Andy, while you were talking about that, I was thinking, I enjoyed that about both of them. But to me, this is a game that I feel like I could be really good at. New York Zoo, I mean, I could be okay. Even though they have definite similarities in that, They're also so different, to your point, Andy, that I also didn't know it was the same game designer. So I was kind of surprised when I looked down and saw that. And I think that's kind of that shows how great a designer he is. I think he has to have intentionally danced around those things and included similarities, but made them different with similar theme. I mean, not theme, but similar, say they're both a pattern building. They involve some of those same things, but in order to keep them so completely different, really shows, I think, just a great skill at what he's doing.
You're moving the moon around the track like you did the elephant in a very similar way when you're going to pick your tile, versus the elephant when you're going to pick a tile to place on your board or gain animals. And your building patterns, it's not the Tetris style. You're trying to put tiles in a certain order to complete tasks. It's very, very well done. Very well thought out.
You look at a lot of the games that Uwe Rosenberg has produced and designed. There's several of them that do follow that pattern building. So you have Patchwork, you have Cottage Garden, that follow that pattern building. You're using polynomial shapes, you're adding onto pieces in your garden, and then there's a variety of games that are completely different, like Mamma Mia.
Right.
Logan, you love Mamma Mia.
Because I'm a dancing queen.
Bonanza.
Yeah, completely different.
Agricola.
Yeah.
He's designed a lot of great games. Not every game follows the building patterns, but there's a lot of opportunities to enjoy some of Uwe Rosenberg's games.
I want to look at a bunch more of those games now, knowing that also did Mamma Mia and Agricola. Bonanza I don't care about. Bonanza's a stupid game.
Bonanza's a great game.
I love Bonanza.
I know so many people love that game. I've just never loved it. That one probably is because I suck at it.
Did you say I'm never going to play this game again when you played it?
I don't know. It was long enough ago. I don't know if I'd started saying that at that point.
Okay. He felt it.
And I will play it again. But I certainly will make other suggestions when somebody suggests that one.
What I like about the abstract game like this is that I can't look over from New York Zoo from last week to Andy's board and be like, oh, well, I better hurry because I got this many spaces up. I could look over at Andy's and he's got 10 discs that he hasn't placed out, and then a turn later, if I'm not paying attention, he could put out 4 or 5 of them in just one turn. Because it's so abstract, it's really hard to just glance at and have an idea of how far he's progressing on those things without staring at his board too intently to screw mine up.
Well, especially when you have 4 players playing and trying to figure out exactly what all 4 players have going on when there's so many tasks in everybody's tableau. That's a really good point, Logan. It is difficult to track what's going on with other players.
Like Nathan was saying, was when David was about to win, we can block him if we pick this or something, but it's like, that's the only time that you can really stop to look at his board to know what can really affect him. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. There's just too much going on. You just have to focus on your own.
Also, looking at that, you can block one particular thing. There's opportunities other places in his tableau.
I mean, there's even an opportunity. He could pick up a new piece and then just complete it off of the other tiles that are next to it if he's got those ones there. Even if you block him with one piece to completing a task, he could complete a task just taking brand new tiles. I love that, being abstract as it is. So that way, you're not focused so much on everybody else's turn about counterplay against Dave or Andy. I have to play my game, and hopefully it works out.
Well, excellent. I strongly recommend Nova Luna. It's one that I'm pleased with, that I have in my collection. It's one that I'll probably keep at home, not necessarily here at game night, because this is one that my wife enjoys. I talked about New York Zoo probably being the first game that I'm going to play 10 times this year. Nova Luna is most definitely going to be the second game that hits 10 times this year.
I concur. This is a great game. It's definitely a 2 thumbs up game for me.
I love his concur.
Well, I normally say conquer, but...
Well, you can conquer the game if you want.
He did conquer when we played.
I don't know if he conquered. I mean, it was pretty competitive.
I felt conquered.
To each his own. I like this game. I think it's a good one. And like we said at the very beginning, it's hard to explain the abstract so you can understand them the best. And so when you go to sit down to play it, it's something you just have to get used to, is looking at the pieces, knowing where they connect, and what connects where. So that way you know when you can complete your tasks. After that, you're sailing, the game's golden.
If you like abstract games, you will like this game a lot. There's a theme, but you could take the theme completely out and play the game. The theme, I don't think, really matters too much. It adds a little bit of flavor, but it's an abstract game and it's a fun game. The mechanics are great. I would be interested to have my wife try it. I'm not sure if this is one she would like or not. She probably would. It would be interesting to have her try it.
Well, I'll let you take it home and give it a try with her.
That sounds awesome. So I'm going to give it 1.5 thumbs up.
That's good enough for me.
That is Nova Luna. Until next time.
Until next time, when you find yourself at the beginning of the new moon or new beginnings, Nathan will find you
At the game table. I'm going to put a question mark on that one. I feel like it's tainted.